at
6:36.
6:36. And would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda.
Mrs. Thomas, no, have no adjustments to add to tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the June 9th meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes of the June 9th meeting.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Communications and correspondence?
I have none for the board this evening.
And public participation. No? None? New business, the approval of the 2015-16 Ellsworth School Department budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Members of the board, members of the audience, members of the press, and members of the viewing public, it is a pleasure and a privilege to be able to present the revised FY16 Ellsworth School Department budget. Before I get to the budget, though, I'd like to reiterate, it's been a great first year as a new Ellsworth School Department. We have spent a year learning about the new department, focusing on improving the department to its former status as a premier school system, instituting a pre-K through adult education philosophy for operations and decision-making, capitalizing on the expertise and knowledge of our administrative, teaching, and support staff, working to make a smooth transition to the proficiency-based educational instructional model, and we're in the process of developing a new vision and mission statement for the school department that incorporates community input and values regarding education and restoring pride in the Ellsworth School Department. We've had a fantastic reception to the new school department from staff, parents, and citizens, and students. And we've also operated this year knowing it was not only an opportunity, but also a responsibility to move the school department forward. When the city voted to ask the school department to come back under the city leadership and guidance, the mandate was we want to improve our school department and make it the best that it can be, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, the budget was developed with that type of a future in mind. Now, before presenting the revised proposed spending plan, I do want to say that coming back home to work in Ellsworth has more than exceeded my expectations. Again, we have the opportunity to lead the new school department. We have a fantastic staff. We have a fantastic school board. We have a fantastic city council. We have the support of our community. So it's really been wonderful to come back and be part of this overall process. We have the ingredients necessary to make this school department once again the premier school system in the state of Maine, and to be part of the overall growth of the city of Ellsworth, to contribute to the desired economic development and in attracting young families to Ellsworth so that they can attend Ellsworth schools and take advantage of economic opportunities. While we know that we still have work to do, we're moving quickly in the right direction, and I'm confident we will again attain the premier status in the very near future. Now, before we get to the revised budget, I do want to give people a quick overview of where we started. And it's in keeping in mind the desire of the city to have our schools back and move the school department in a forward direction. The initial budget that we proposed for your consideration came in with the philosophy of taking the school department forward. There were no extras in it, there were no frills in it, and it was a responsible proposal. Now, the proposal that was in its first form, if you remember, included a 7.07% increase. Included in that particular draft were a new kindergarten teacher for enrollment purposes, 4 new special ed teaching positions to move forward in what we call a co-teaching model, a new technology integration teacher and additional time for our technology integration staff, 2 new full-time custodial positions to replace positions that were lost in past years, a half-time guidance counselor position at EEMS, increasing the athletic director assistant principal position at EEMS to a full-year, full-time position, adding a half-time person in the central office, business office, adding a new ed tech at Hancock County Technical Center for the early childhood program, increasing in a half-time teacher for the adult education program, and making the adult education director, who is sharing responsibilities of directing and teaching, into a full-time position. We also included in that budget draft funding to address facilities and operational needs, and to upgrade the bus inventory by purchasing a new bus. We also included a significant amount of professional development dollars to support teacher work in the ongoing transition to proficiency-based education, and that is work that takes place from the pre-K level all the way through our adult ed program. We also included budgets in that initial proposal for upgrades to curriculum materials and resources, and these were based upon the results of student assessments that were conducted on our students. And the other piece that it's important for the board to know and the audience to know and the members of the viewing public to know, we also developed this initial budget with the knowledge that the 15-16 budget is the true baseline budget for the Ellsworth School Department. Okay? The budget that was put together for 14-15 was put together very well in a very short period of time, as I'm sure you folks remember, and it was very well done. But we were dealing with withdrawal, we were dealing with a number of one-time costs, and taking a look at what are the things that we're going to need without a full view of everything that was necessary. So this is really the budget that represents the first baseline year. Now, with that 7% increase, we also had to forecast in what was available for revenues. And I think this is very important. Even if we had no increase in proposed expenditures, we would experience an increase on the local side of things. First and foremost was in the initial state proposal for school subsidy, there was an increase in the mill rate expectation, which is the amount of money that school departments need to raise in order to receive full state subsidy. The increased mill rate expectation went from 8.1 mills compared against our valuation to 8.48 mills. This represented a $349,000 increase in what we would have to raise. That is a local expense. Coupled with that, the prize that we get for raising additional funds would be a decrease in subsidy of about $290,000. And in terms of miscellaneous revenues and decreases in tuition expectations in the amount of $445,000, we're talking about nearly a $1 million impact on the local expenditures. So that's without even looking at the expenditure side. The other piece that I would add is over the past 2 years, last year and this coming year, there was an increase for school departments in the state of Maine in the amount of teacher retirement costs that need to be paid. Formerly, that was paid through the state's general fund and not part of the educational funding model. Over the past 2 years, school departments have been asked to pick up a portion of those costs. For 14-15, it was 2.65% of costs. For 15-16, it's 3.38% of eligible wage costs. The amount in 14-15 was $175,000. The amount in 15-16 is projected to be $234,000. So even if we had a 0% budget increase overall, that was a 0% budget, which would decrease the level of programs and services, we would still have seen nearly an $833,000 increase in the local assessment due to the shift of the cost from the state side of the budget to the local side of the budget. Again, when I say a 0% budget, that is not maintaining the current level of programs and services. So I think it's important for members of the viewing public and for the board to understand that's a significant challenge. And again, keeping in mind the mandate that we have to improve our schools. Now, since that initial draft, we knew that that was not going to fly. That was a far too great an increase to the local citizenry. So we were asked to go back and work with our leadership team to come up with a budget proposal to bring forward that we would take to our voters that represented, to all extents and purposes, maintaining the current level of programs and services. Okay? The idea of taking us forward in the second year of operation was too expensive for us. So we crafted a budget proposal that would maintain programs and services and not move us backwards. We removed all of the new positions that we were hoping to add, with the exception of the kindergarten teacher position, and the reason that remains in the budget is because of the expectation of enrollment that requires that additional teacher. Okay. A part-time custodian at the Ellsworth Elementary Middle School to replace needs that we have, and the reason that is in there is because we have been using a substitute for the balance of this year to fill the cleaning needs that we have. Okay. And keeping a part-time special education administrative assistant who would be housed in the central office to deal with a new requirement from the state that requires us to deal with billing for a special purpose private school that's located in our municipality. We transitioned a number of maintenance projects from a 1-year project into a 2- or 3-year phase-in. We looked at our grant resources to address a number of needs for our staff and professional development. And we arrived at a proposal that, again, maintained programs and services that incorporated a 2.6% increase overall, which translated to about a $1.33 million increase locally. That budget, as you know, was approved by you as a board, was approved by the council, and on June 9th, the voters, in a very low turnout, did not approve it, and that was by a vote of 129 to 105. With that message, the following morning, on June 10th, day after the referendum, brought the leadership team together to review options for reducing that budget proposal, with the knowledge that further reductions to this proposal were going to have an impact on students and programming. But with that knowledge, the group offered recommendations for consideration, and we worked to prioritize those options. We have come up with about $134,000 in reductions, and I'll talk about those in a moment. Now, as I noted in the presentation to you on May 12th and to the council on May 18th, any further reductions would result in a reduction and an impact on programs and services. So, what I'd like to do is very briefly go through the various cost centers and talk about, under the new budget proposal that we're talking about tonight, where the increases will be and what those increases represent. In the regular instruction category, we would be looking at an increase of $40,800, which is 0.71%. The bulk of that will come in contracted salary increases in the amount of $38,000. Okay? And really the primary piece in that is the new kindergarten teacher position. Okay? Under special instruction, which are special education students, we have an increase of $164,575. The overwhelming bulk of that comes in contracted salaries. And a big portion of that is in our ed tech population. We inherited a new contract from the RSU this year, and we negotiated a new contract. A significant portion of those costs fall under that particular contract. Okay. Would also add that the new half-time special education administrative assistant falls under that special programming, but there are revenues that we have to offset those costs, yet they're still expended as an expenditure. Career and technical education, Hancock County Technical Center, an increase of just under $25,000. Actually, it's a decrease in the overall program there when you consider that we have a revolving renovation loan payment of $90,000. Okay. Other instruction, which is our extracurricular programs, we have an increase of $9,000, which is 1.9%. Student and staff support, which includes your guidance program, your nursing program, curriculum and assessment, instructional technology, has an increase of $88,000 or 5%. Included in that would be $31,000 for tuition reimbursement, which are dollars that our staff access for professional development. $14,000 in curriculum work for our kindergarten through grade 7 population, and software and hardware purchases of about $200,000. Okay. Okay. Under system administration, we have an increase of $35,000 or 7.5%, and what is included on that line is one position that was not included in the 14-15 budget. That was for a full-time bookkeeper in the central office. And again, I would also mention that there are funds to cover that in our negotiated agreement to provide services to Hancock and Lemoyne. But that has to be recorded as an expenditure in the budget. School administration line, which is in essence your principal's offices, we have a decrease of about $26,000. Okay. In our facilities program, we have an increase of $28,775 or 1.4%. Included in that would be a half-time custodial position at EMS, purchase services at EMS in $19,800, and some capital renewal programs at the high school, which include the roof over the administrative area, parking lot, sidewalks, and lights, and that's in the vicinity of about $66,000. So the overall program, aside from those increases, would show a decrease, but still overall it's an increase of $28,000. Transportation, we have an increase of $1,655. Okay, and again, we're being very efficient there. The biggest piece is wages for student transportation, and these are drivers we have to transport students that need special transportation. We're anticipating an increase of $35,000. Okay, but again, in the entire transportation category, we're talking $1,600 overall. Food services, because of a revenue shortfall, we need more students to access school lunch. We're looking at an increase of $62,500 in the assessment to school side of the budget. Now, a couple of other things to mention before I talk about the reductions. essential programs and services funding does not reach the statutory mandated amount of 55% of the total cost of education. And as you know, that was voted in by the voters many years ago. The state has never been able to reach that mythical 55% level. Additionally, the 100% essential programs and services figure used to determine the total state and local cost of education is only calculated at 97%. Again, the state has never been able to reach that full 100%. Okay. Some other pieces that are helpful to us in this budget proposal, and I mentioned this at our last presentation, we actually saw a slight decrease in health insurance premiums. The way that the MEA Benefits Trust calculates increases in premiums is based upon your last 2 years of loss and claims history. Ellsworth employees have done a very good job in that area, and that's why we're seeing a slight decrease. Without that decrease, we could see a much greater increase to the budget. We've had a number of retirements, and although we don't like to see our veteran quality staff retire, there comes a time when they have to make that decision. I think you did that a few years ago. Yeah, okay. Those retirements result in a reduction in the budget because you're having someone retire who's at the top of the scale, and oftentimes you do not hire someone at the top of the scale. We also saw a decrease in per gallon expense for number 2 heating oil. We were locked in at $2.87 this year. We're going to be at $2.04 a gallon next year. And a decrease in the electrical kilowatt per hour charge for most of our facilities. We're locked in under the contract that we used to be in when we were part of the RSU until December of 2017. So there's some very positive pieces that go along with this budget as well. Now, in terms of how do we get from a budget that had a 2.6% increase to a budget that has a 1.9% increase, here are the reductions. First, we opted not to fill one of 2 vacant Ellsworth High School social studies positions. This results in a savings of about $45,000. Now, this is a reduction that will result in some schedule changes at the high school and an impact on class offerings, class sizes, and on students' ability to access courses. We have larger class sizes in the World and Honors World History class. We'll be eliminating 1 section each of psychology and sociology. Okay. And we will see in our core classes, class sizes increase a little bit. Okay. Again, it's unfortunate. We would like to maintain that position, but that is one place that we can look to find a savings. And again, it will have an impact on students and programming. Okay. Another position that we looked at was the literacy specialist position at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School. This is a position that used to be a K-4 position, and through a retirement and some look at student data, we decided to make that position a 5 through 8 position. So it's a different position in the budget, but not an increase in the budget. What we did with the first version of the budget, we decided to fund half of that program under Title I-A. Okay? When we looked at needing to come back a second time and look at the budget, we looked again at our Title I-A resources, and we found that we had purchased a number of supplies and resources this year that had not been purchased in a number of years using Title I-A funds that we're not going to have to purchase again for a number of years. So we had enough money to cover the full cost of that position under Title I. So we'll be transitioning the balance of that position, the remaining half-time of that position, under Title I-A, and that will reduce the local budget by $29,000. At EMS, we looked at textbooks and supplies. We have a $9,100 reduction there. We looked at a social studies series of textbooks that we were considering, and through working with Mr. Newitt and Mrs. Corman Ramos, found a suitable alternative for that would save $6,500, and Mr. Newitt identified about $3,100 in supplies that we did not need. Okay. Another program where we were able to take a look at an existing grant program and in local entitlement program specifically, and found that we were expecting to have a relatively healthy carryover to use for next year. So we looked at, are there options that we have where we can, under an approved expenditure, move some costs under the local entitlement program. So what we will do is take the special education program for the summer, which is $21,290, and move that from the local budget under the local entitlement grant budget. Okay. Took another look at the anticipated out-of-district tuition line, and this is a line for which we have funds for students we expect to be tuitioned to an out-of-district placement for students that we are not able to program for here. We reduced that by $5,000. We reduced in the special education consultant line $1,875 for an evaluation tool that we were able to purchase this year. We found for summer professional development work for our kindergarten teachers that we had $2,150 that were under the local budget that could be funded under Title I. We've moved those expenses. I looked at the usage of heating oil and electricity at EMS and EHS and was able to reduce each, the heating oil and the electricity line at both of those facilities by $250 for a total of $1,000. Okay. And the final one is a reduction that came about today. I was speaking with Russ Gray about one of the vacancies we have to fill in our transportation staff. And in discussing that, Russ indicated that he thought there was an additional new position for a driver in the budget. And I decided to check that out because that was not part of our conversation. I did notice that we did have, in our accounting software, an additional driving position. So that results in about another $17,800 reduction. Okay. When you look at all of these reductions, we have a total reduction of about $134,636.96, which brings our proposed budget that we're bringing forward to you tonight to $19,518,535.18, which is an increase of $363,753.54, or 1.9% over the current year budget. Okay. Now again, going from 2.6% to 1.9%, you can see from these reductions, particularly with the social studies position, we have an impact on our students in programming. But again, we believe this is a responsible budget to bring forward at 1.9%. Okay. Now, when you add in the adult education budget, and again, I want to be very clear to the board, people in the audience, and people in the viewing public, that the adult education program was only operated for a portion of the year this year. It will be operated for the full year next year. So the increase of $65,000 that you see for that is simply to allow the program to operate for a full year. We have not added anything new to that, even though we wanted to. But when you add in the adult education budget, total increase becomes $429,300, or 2.2%. Again, I stress to you, on the expenditure side of the budget, that's a very responsible budget. Now, the local side of the ledger, the total appropriation is going to be $11,073,852, which is an increase of $1.13 million, or 11.38%. Now, I would remind you that the last budget we took forward had a 12.74% increase. Okay. So we have been able to move that down. Now, when you factor in the adult education program, which is budgeted separately, it represents 11.81% increase. Now, again, I stress to you, the budget represents, with the exception of the impact on programs and students affected by the decision not to fill one of the high school social studies vacancies, it's a spending plan that maintains current levels of programs and services. There are no frills, there are no additions, there are nothing new that we can use to take the school department forward. But it also represents the fact that we will be operating our successful adult education program for a full year rather than a partial year. Now, a couple of other notable items before we turn it to you for questions. We still do not know what the final decision on the state budget is going to be. We know that a couple of days ago, the legislature reached a deal and approved a budget that it sent to the governor's desk. And that budget was reported to include approximately $80 million more for education than was reflected in the previous budget. Earlier today, Governor LePage issued, I believe, over 60 line item vetoes for the legislature to consider. And one of those, to our understanding, was one for over $30 million in education. That would still represent, if that budget is not, that veto is not overturned, an increase for education. If the veto is overturned, however, my understanding is it will go back to the $80 million level. Now, unless someone in the viewing audience or the public here has seen something different, I do not know that the legislature has acted on any of those vetoes at this point in time. But with that being said, we are expecting that there are going to be some level of additional dollars coming to schools through the general purpose aid. And the thing that's important for you as a board to know, people in the audience here tonight, and the members of the viewing public to know, if and when we receive additional dollars, the City Council has already recommended that those additional dollars be used to reduce the local impact on taxes this year. Okay? I think it's important that we know that. Okay? So with that being said, before I turn it over to you, I also want to put out there some dates that are very important for the members of our viewing public moving forward. After you take your action tonight on the budget, you'll be authorizing me to take this budget to the City Council. The City Council is scheduled to meet Friday, June 26th in these chambers at 9 o'clock in the morning, and my understanding is That will also be a televised meeting. That is the hearing on the budget and the council's opportunity to approve a budget. They will take action on the budget on that day, and their action will be to approve a budget. And they do have the option of increasing or decreasing the budget at that time. But once they take action, they will be sending that budget to the voters for referendum on July 7th. Okay, that's Tuesday, July 7th. And we encourage any and all registered voters to exercise their civic responsibility and get out and vote. So, with that being said, there is the budget proposal for the board. And the Finance Committee, I would add, has seen this proposal and opted to bring it forward as well.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a motion? We can just-
I make a motion to approve the 2015-16 Ellsworth School Department budget and to authorize the superintendent to submit the budget to the Ellsworth City Council for approval.
I second that.
Okay, discussion? No?
I think it's important also to note before that they went to the city council, that was approved by the city council the first time and that they,
The first time around, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, the first budget that you approved back on May 12th unanimously was sent to the city council on May 18th. They had their public hearing on it that evening, and that was also approved, I believe, unanimously.
Mhm.
All those in favor?
Okay,
Okay.
good, thank you.
Calendar and announcements. School board meeting on Tuesday, July 14th, 2015, City Hall, Council Chambers at 6:30.
May I also add, just again, to reiterate, the city council will take up the budget that you just approved next Friday morning at 9 o'clock. And would also like to add a plug for the vision and mission process that the school department has been undergoing for the past 5 or 6 weeks. As part of that process, the next step is to hold a community forum where we will take the results of the survey and the trends and themes that came from all of those questions, bring a group together and talk about those and talk about the future of education for the purpose of further refining those trends and themes so that the steering committee can craft that into a written vision and mission statement and set of statements of guiding beliefs. Now, even though the process calls for the steering committee to cast invitations to people that were in the stakeholder groups, there was also a public invitation that has gone out. It appeared in the Ellsworth American this week. We have posted it on our website. We have sent it to all of our staff. And what we ask is if there are any people who are interested in participating in that process to contact Teresa Austin in the superintendent's office and to let them know that they are interested. And that community forum will take place next Tuesday evening, June 23rd, at 6 o'clock at EEMS.
Thank you. Next is adjournment.
I make a motion, having no further business to adjourn the board meeting.
I second that.
All those in favor?
And that is 7:05. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.